Hey there, wedding photographers. Welcome back. Today I want to talk about an essential skill for wedding photographers, and that is using flash at receptions. If you're a wedding photographer or want to be a wedding photographer, it is really important that you're able to use your flash effectively, because you just never know when you're going to be in a dimly lit situation and when you're going to need your flash. There are so many different ways you can use flash, and different photographers have different preferences. But personally, I like to keep my flash on my camera during the reception. I find that having my flash on my camera is helpful because receptions and wedding days are dynamic, fast-moving events, and you never know when you're gonna have to move across the room or move to a different area because of something exciting happening. Things can change in the blink of an eye on a wedding day, and for me, I find that running around at a wedding reception or a wedding carrying a light stand just is not the best use of time for me, and there are a few drawbacks to it that I personally find. So let's dive into why I think using your flash on camera is an efficient solution, and how exactly I use my flash during different types of scenarios. You see, I find that weddings are all about capturing those amazing, candid, unplanned moments. And these amazing moments often happen in low lighting situations after the sun has set. As a wedding photographer, you cannot afford to miss those precious moments. So this is where your ability to use flash comes in handy. One of the key issues is that you have to be able to determine when you should use flash and when you shouldn't use flash. For me, one of my rules of thumb is that I will start to use flash when the ambient light level gets too low. So how do I know that the light level is too low? When I'm shooting and I've exhausted all ways to let more light into the camera, when I've increased my aperture to its maximum size, when my shutter speed is the lowest it can go without having camera shake, and when my ISO is up quite high, then I know, it is time to add flash. It's gotten pretty dark out. For example, let's say I'm shooting at f2.8 and I'm using a lens where that is the maximum size aperture I could use. Also, let's say my shutter speed is 1/100. So that is a pretty slow shutter speed for me. I wouldn't want it dipping any lower than that if I wanted sharp photos. And also, let's say my ISO is about 1000, which is on the higher side. Once I've got those camera settings, if it gets any darker, I'll know that I'll have to bring out my flash. Otherwise, my photos are going to start looking quite grainy. This is why it comes in handy to be using manual mode on your camera, because when you're shooting in manual, you will be aware of all the settings, and you'll be aware of when you've reached the point where you should start using flash. Something to think about. When you're at a reception and it's getting dimmer out, maybe the sun is starting to set, the room's looking a little bit darker, and you're thinking, okay, time to use my flash. It's getting quite dark. Well, the settings on your camera are really critical. So first off, you want to make sure that you set your camera settings so that you can allow some ambient light to enter your camera. So you want to have some of the light from the room entering in your camera. For example, maybe you want the light, like that background light, if you're shooting the scene I'm in, to show up in your camera at a certain intensity. It's nice to have some of this ambient light entering your camera because it sets the scene and the mood of the location that you're shooting in. So to achieve this, to let the ambient light in my camera, I'll keep my camera on manual mode, and I will adjust my aperture, usually a wider aperture, so probably f2.8, to let some of that ambient light into the camera. And then I will set my shutter speed, maybe 1/160 or 1/100, something like that. The lower shutter speed will also allow more ambient light to come in the camera. I just don't want my shutter speed to get too low because I don't want to have camera shake. And then finally, I'll raise my ISO maybe up to 1000 or maybe even a little bit higher, because having the higher ISO will also allow more ambient light into your image. Listen, don't be afraid to bump up that ISO a little bit when you're shooting in low light or at a reception. And consider opening up the aperture a little wider if possible. Just make sure that your images are still sharp. You can check on the back of your LCD screen to confirm that they're still sharp. When you do this, you will allow some ambient light to enter into your camera, and it will help you capture the mood of the scene. Also, if your images get noisy, if they get noise in them because of a high ISO, there is that new feature in Lightroom, the denoise feature, which is amazing. So if you do get noise, you can always check out that new feature. I'm not a fan of making receptions look like they're lit by an even bright light so that everything is bright. Like it's like cafeteria with fluorescent lights. Someone turned on the lights on the dance floor and all of a sudden everyone's like, ah, it's so bright in here. I especially don't like that look for dance floor photos. It just looks a little bit odd. I really like to preserve the atmosphere. So once you've dialed in your camera settings to allow the correct amount of ambient light into your camera that you want, it's time to put your flash on and add some light to light up your subject. So ideally, I like to bounce my flash off a white wall or a white ceiling. That is the best case scenario. That will help create soft, diffused, flattering light on people. But sometimes you're dealing with like a black ceiling or a really high ceiling. And in that case, it's difficult to bounce your flash. With a black ceiling, the black kind of just soaks up all the light, and a really high ceiling also makes it hard to bounce off of. So there's a few different things you can do in that case when it's difficult to bounce your flash. You can either turn your flash so it's facing the people directly, so you could use direct flash. Something I like to do is raise the little bounce card on the top of my flash, so that will enable the light to bounce onto the subject. If you want, you could add a light modifier onto your camera flash, like Mag Mod. I have one of those. I don't use it that often. I find either using direct flash or using the bounce card works well enough for me, but it's something you might want to try is a light modifier. That works too. Now, I know some photographers love to use off-camera flash, especially in receptions. Using off-camera flash, it can add a different feeling to your photos. I'm not going to deny, but I personally find it's cumbersome to be setting up light stands and flashes at receptions. I find that the flash stands can get in the way. Often they'll be positioned in the wrong spot so that they're in my photo and they don't look pretty. Also, if you're not careful, your flash stands can be a hazard for your guests, and your guests could end up tripping over them, which is something I really don't want. Plus, I'm constantly moving at a reception, and I personally find that my flash stands, because I'm moving all the time, are never in the right location, and I don't feel like moving the flash stands all the time. If I'm going to be doing that, I'm going to be missing critical moments. This might not be a popular opinion, but every photographer does things differently. I'm just explaining how I do things, and there's other photographers out there who love using off-camera flash, and that works for them. So you just have to pick what works for you. Okay, so sometimes there'll be videographers at the wedding, and they will often use continuous light panels in order to light speakers or people when they're dancing. When that happens, I like to take advantage of their light, and I'll just piggyback on their light and use that. So in that situation, that is ambient light, and I will adjust my settings to account for that light. So I find when you shoot like this, it can look really cool, but also it can look highly contrasty because the people will be lit and then the background can go very dark. So if you don't like that contrasty look, you can expose for the people and then just pop your flash on and bounce your flash and add a little light to fill in the scene and brighten it up. So there you have it. That is a quick summary of how I like to use flash at a reception. Being able to use your flash on camera is really important, and it's a skill that photographers should know. It's nice to know how to use your flashes off camera too, but at the bare minimum, I think you need to be comfortable with using your flash on camera. What matters most is your ability to deliver great photos that your clients appreciate, and also create an experience that is great for your clients as well. Thanks for watching, and if you found this video helpful, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I'd love to know if there are any other topics that you're interested in, and I could create a future video to address that. Happy shooting, and I will see you next time. Bye.